Hi everyone! Giving this a second to kind of let it load on Facebook. Thank you for joining me today. This is a Techy Tuesday with Rachel. Today I don't have some actual tech tools that I wanted to show you guys. Y'all might have seen on the Mobile Fellows page or on my personal Facebook page that, I've been attending a few conferences recently. One was through TBR, and one was actually through a book publisher. And through these, I've kind of started to develop a few ideas that I wanted to share with y'all. And it would be kind of neat to get y'all's feedback down below or when I post this on Facebook or on the blog for you guys to check out. So welcome you guys to the Techy Tool Time with Rachel. Again, if you're just joining us, I host these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. live, and then we kind of keep them on our social media for y'all to check out later. So, as you guys might have seen in some of Dawn's posts, the Mobile Fellows extended the deadline until this Friday, the 21st, and there's not really a time for that, just sometime during the day on the 21st is when it's due. Below this video, I'll put the links to that, or at least a link to the blog to take y'all to the links to be able to apply if you haven't got around to it yet. The application process is not meant to be stressful. It's meant for you guys to convey your projects to us and how you are going to be exploring the technology, who all would be using the technology, how are you going to study its efficiency and its effect on your overall goals, how are you going to gauge its success or not, would it be applicable to other faculty members on campus or other student groups on campus or staff. Remember, this is open to faculty and staff. I can't stress enough that we're here to explore ideas. So a lot of the little ideas I have are just things that are little thought bubbles right now. Some of these are paths I might eventually go down on my own. Some of them are things I'm just kind of throwing out there to see if anybody else is interested in these things. I think I have a fairly creative mind, so some of these, might be a little out of the box. A lot of faculty out there have seen like what I do or what Dawn does or a few of our other Mobile Fellows. Y'all have seen what we do, and a lot of it does revolve around the iPad. For me, I selected the iPad because I felt like it had the most application options for me. Now that I've been using it for a few years now, I found that to be true. I think it's fairly user-friendly to pick up how to use it. It has a lot of accessories that can go with it. I feel like the accessories are something I personally am going to want to start to branch out in soon. And there are other mobile tools out there. We're not limited to using the iPad. Remember, when y'all apply, this is open to all mobile and emerging technologies. We have a 3D printing project. So there's some people out there using Surface Pros. So, get creative and, apply if you have an idea, no matter how big or small you think it is. One of the major reasons I wanted to get a program like this started at our institution was when I first started using the iPad, I felt alone and I felt like I didn't have anyone to share my data with or to see if other classes could achieve similar results as I have. So with a program like this, we have somebody to bounce ideas off of. That's actually one of my primary jobs as a mobile mentor, I think, is if you have an idea, maybe you Googled it or looked into a few apps on your own and you weren't really happy with their success, I'm somebody to bounce ideas off of, including the rest of the group when we hold meetings throughout the semester. We're trying to generate a little mobile community here and trying to explore and see what works here on our campus. If you have any questions before you apply, feel free to shoot me or Dawn an email. And again, in that blog post that I'll put down below, I will make sure that information is in there as well. So on to some of my ideas. Dawn talked about virtual reality. I wasn't live for that event, so I'm not sure if he showed some of the headsets that are available now. This is actually the one that we got when we went to our TBR meeting. I think there's some really neat applications for this, and literally you just put your cell phone in here and close it up, and you can load your app to whatever service you're working through, and this is something your students can put on and experience your course materials in a whole new way. And I've seen all kinds of classes use these. There's a chemistry professor developing an app to build molecules in 3D space, so that way students could have a better, more one-on-one visualization of that. I've seen history professors using them, so that way students can feel more interactive in the environment, so they can get a better feel for what it was like to live back then. I actually know a history professor that's trying to develop an app to where if you mess up one thing in that moment of history, how could that kind of spiral out from there? There's a lot of kind of easy virtual reality softwares out there, and I think that would be a great project. Learning how to use one of these softwares and maybe developing your own environment and trying it out with your students. Part of your project might be requesting not something like this probably, but Google Cardboard. Honestly, I've been using Google Cardboard for over a year, and it works just as well as these. The only upside to the nicer ones is that I can wear this for over an hour straight, whereas Google Cardboard I tend to not want to have on for more than about 15-20 minutes because of motion sickness that can begin to occur. But I've got to get some hands-on experience with using some of the virtual reality softwares that are out there, and there's a lot where they're already designing the pieces and you put it together in a virtual reality world, actually similar to some gaming systems like Minecraft. And that kind of brings me to my next idea. Minecraft can be free for your base world, but to build onto it, some of those things might cost some money. I especially know a lot of online environments that are using Minecraft to create a more gaming experience for students. So instead of just clicking on links in D2L, they're using Minecraft to have the students gather in a world together, and they can interact within that world. So for example, let's just picture an underwater seascape. And so what's underwater? Maybe a sea turtle and a treasure chest and a shark coming at you along with your students that are in the world with you. And so if you swim over to the shark, maybe the shark gives you something. And to make it a little more applicable to higher ed, or even for me in chemistry, the world might not be what the focus is, but what the shark gives you is. Maybe that's an assignment that you have to complete. And as soon as you complete it, then the treasure chest opens. And then that's another assignment. So this is kind of a fun way where you can build on student strengths. And if you have the world designed in such a way that if they fail this assignment, it'll open or take them to the sea turtle. But if they do well, it'll take them to some higher level learning assignments like the treasure chest. So there's some kind of neat assignment delivery options in these gaming worlds. And again, that might cost a little money to do something like that. So those are kind of for my first two ideas. Dawn also just did one for Skype. And there's a few things with that I wanted to throw some ideas I had, and also maybe some accessories you might have. And even for myself, one thing I think I might need to get if I keep doing these is a mic. I've noticed that my sound on my cell phone, that's how I'm recording this, is not that good. And I imagine if I was going to use Skype, I would use my cell phone. Oh, and I just got a comment down here. I'm actually not that familiar with Second Life. If y'all can see the comment down below, it's asking about if Second Life would be viable similar to how Minecraft is. And I'm not really sure. Maybe there's something else you can answer down below. Is Second Life something that is maybe a little more user-friendly, and is there any cost associated with that? So with Skype, if you are thinking about using that in your classroom, almost all of our classrooms have a computer, have the Microsoft things loaded to it, and if Skype's not, we could get it loaded to it possibly. And I have this idea of bringing in guest speakers live to your class. And if the students are logged into Skype as well, they'll be able to directly interact with that speaker. So it's not just going to be them giving a presentation. It can be more a one-on-one, with the speaker itself. So this might be a good way to bring people in from industry, or even people that have experienced the things that you're talking about. So that way it's not just you relaying it or watching a YouTube video. The students might feel more connected if they get to actually meet the people and ask them questions in real time with that. And another thing that I think some faculty members have toyed with, but Skype for Business I think would make it a little bit easier, would be something like online office hours. This might particularly be true if you mainly house your courses in the online environment, but I think this might be true for our face-to-face classes as well. So my desktop computer, for example, doesn't have a video recorder on it, and again, I would need a mic. So those are two little things that we can kind of play around with, and we can kind of gauge, well, are my students more successful if they attend these Skype meetings? Am I getting a greater percentage of students coming to online office hours? So let's geek out a little more for a second, since you guys know I am big on mobile tools. I am loving quizzes. If y'all haven't seen me play with it or saw my last video, I actually tried to compare and contrast it with Kahoot. I don't know if the format of that video is that good, but Kahoot is projector dependent. But with quizzes, the whole entire quiz goes to the student device, so you don't have to be in the same room. So what I've been trying with my students is we come and I say, okay, we're going to do a Skype meeting at 2 p.m. this day. If y'all want to log on 15 minutes before, go to the quizzes, try the quizzes, and then that gives us something to review during my office hours. It's making them much more productive. It's motivating students to attend, but it's not as formal as a review session. And also I can do it anywhere that I'm at. Maybe at 2 p.m. that day I'm here in my office like I am right now, but maybe my students would prefer a 6 p.m. Well, I can open it up and do a quizzes and a Skype business at home on my mobile device or on my laptop computer as well. So I think there's some real possibilities of using Skype for Business to help reach our students and get them the materials they need and get their their questions answered. And then another kind of twist to that would be, can we maybe utilize social media for that? Could we use social media as kind of a running question and answer, and then have Skype running on the side as more of a face-to-face connection with that? And kind of an upside of doing it that way is the social media account, like a page for your class that you created. One, you can make it private just for your class, but two, it's going to keep a record of everything you guys covered. So I think there's some really fun things that we could measure with that. Yeah, get my answers questioned. I mean, actually, that might be not a typo in the way that I said that. Sometimes they think they know the answer and they might not. And I know that starting a few years ago, the idea of a flipped classroom was kind of harped on in a lot of ways, and it was really stressful for a lot of us, because we just I don't think the concept was that well developed. But I kind of wanted to revisit that, because again, since I do use my iPad for just about everything, I have personally learned about making videos on my iPad, how students interact with my videos, and I have found that generating content using a mobile device is a lot easier, I think, than even 2 years ago it was. So I think, again, a Mobile Fellows project, you know, if you really have thought, man, I might want to flip my classroom and I don't have a mobile device to try it out on. Studies have kind of shown that students, especially if they're in the online environment or at home environment, they're interacting with the materials using their mobile device. I think there's a lot to be said for a faculty member to be viewing it that way as well. You know, how do your documents look on a mobile device? How do the students interact with it? By touching the screen instead of using a mouse. So, you could explore the apps of how to curate your material, how to get your students to interact with each other on an online environment, and even generate that flipped classroom environment for your face-to-face classes, so y'all can focus on the problem solving or the discussion aspect of things. Something else, and this is something I wish that I could demo, because like I just mentioned, I think having a device in your hand gives you a better feel for how students interact with things. But all of our classes, essentially, a lot of them are projector dependent, or if we've decided we don't want to stand up in the front and use the projector, it's really discussion dependent. Well, one thing, y'all know I'm a Nearpod-aholic. There's a new app out called Go Formative that's competing with Nearpod, if you want to look into that. But I love the idea of using the iPad to deliver the content, but that would allow me as a professor to sit down one-on-one with my students and really have a discussion face-to-face with them. I think it would give you a much more small class feel, and I think that when this teacher sits with the student, I think it makes them less intimidated a little bit to share their thoughts. And even with that, let's expand it a little further. There's been studies that have showed that using mobile devices are helping to bring down some of the barriers we have in our class, and this is actually what I'm about to say. One of the reasons I got started with mobile devices myself is if I asked somebody to tell me the answer, two types of people told me the answer. One, the really confident ones, which is great. They just shout out anything. I love that interaction. But two, the second type of student that answers it is that kind of typical A student, and they get it right very quickly every single time. And so by utilizing mobile devices, it's helped me pace my course better. I don't just move on because someone shouted the answer out. I'm getting my students' answers collected on my device, so that way I can see how the majority of the class, how quickly they're answering. But it also allows me to review their answers. And there's some apps like Nearpod, but there's other apps where I can share what they've sent in with each other. And so again, instead of, saying, oh, Sally, she always answers, I'm just not going to answer because she always answers. Or Billy Bob over here, he's scared to answer because he doesn't know if he's right and he doesn't want to shout it out. Mobile devices are a way to kind of lower that anxiety, get feedback from your students, and help generate that discussion that so many of us want in our courses. And then my last idea, and I know these are all over the place, but this was just, I knew I wanted to talk about this since our deadline was coming up, and I just wanted to throw them out there. Maybe all of them are something nobody would want to use, but these are things I think we could study on our campus. So I think my first video of the semester, 2 videos, is about Microsoft 365. So what we learned from that video is, all our Microsoft products are on our desktop computer, but now with Microsoft 365, I can put the products on my mobile device, and I have access to my OneDrive, which is a storage space on my mobile device, and it's a cloud service, so it's also on all of my other devices when I need it. So here's my ideas branching around that. One, could we go paperless? And I know a lot of us have explored that. For example, D2L has a grader app on here. I personally didn't feel like it was useful for my class. I do know a few faculty using it for that. The grader app downloads and puts everything on here. Well, if I don't like the grader app, well, there's a thing on the Microsoft products, the Microsoft 365, called a class notebook. And what I'm really loving about this is you make one notebook, and then in class I can use this notebook to take my notes, and I can send it to all the students. But then I can also have the students use the notebook more individually, so they don't have access to each other's files, but I have access to all the files. And so you're wondering, well, how's this different to D2L? A lot of it's still about the look and the feel of the app. And D2L, besides the grader here, doesn't have a lot of options for hand grading. Well, there's a handwriting feature right into the class notebook. So again, you can give your class notes, but you can grade assignments. So it's kind of like a whole class all together, but it can also be used as individual students. And I'm loving this. I'm very excited to try to explore this myself. But could we take it one step further? Can we take classes that use a bunch of paper bound things? For example, chemistry lab, that's what I teach, is chemistry. But I'm sure there's other things out there where you have, tons of binders of paper. Could we replace that with the class notebook? Because again, the students have access to these Microsoft products too, so they could put it on their phone or their devices, so that way everybody has access to those things. And again, even back to the flipped class idea too, maybe use the Microsoft 365 notebook to deliver your content. Again, I really need to do a demo of this because it's like an interactive textbook that you've typed up. You can have things that you've typed, you can put in links, you can put in videos, all there in one space, and then on top of that, write on it if you want to, or use it in class to write on live. So I think this might be a neat way to get materials to students as a whole and individually, and I can't stress that enough. I've actually haven't seen another product out there like this besides D2L, but this is more interactive than D2L. Yeah, I love that, Dawn. Thanks. That's a great suggestion. Just trying to get students educated and learning the 365. In my 365 video, we do have training resources for students. I actually have the little flyer that they have for the library for this. This is awesome. It's customizable for your class. So if you generated a project, even if it was just one project to try it out using Microsoft 365, you could create training tools individually for your students based off their library of tools that we have free access to. So I think that would be great. And also on that note, there is an accessibility feature in all Microsoft products. We've used a lot of the accessibility checkers, and we've been learning more about best practices with accessibility. So maybe we could experiment with the accessibility using the notebook. There's a few other things I love with 365, like Sway. I think that's a neat way to create presentations. There's a few other neat things online. I'm not going to jump into it too much, but kind of on that accessibility note, I've noticed, because I am not a big fan of Microsoft Word, I have a hard time retyping everything and formatting everything on my desktop. But I am finding that it's easier for me to do what I need to do on my mobile device. And that was kind of something I wasn't expecting. Now, y'all know that I have my keyboard for my device, so I do need that to be able to type things. But there's some things I found have made it a little bit easier to make them accessible compared to on my desktop. So that's something I'm still playing with, and I will report in the spring when I do my final report myself. Yeah, and Don just said he's going to talk about Sway. A bunch of us are playing with it. It's kind of like PowerPoint. It's kind of like an interactive website. It's a neat mesh of those two worlds. So let's see. I kind of have little post-its of things down here, and I was just trying to think if I had anything else. There's still a bunch of faculty that want to project wirelessly, but we don't have a lot of us really exploring that. And I would think it would be neat if there's a way we could use mobile devices to get us out of the classroom, especially on the Blount County campus. Their amphitheater is gorgeous. And I think that would be a neat project, like trying to figure out how to utilize mobile devices to get us out of the classroom. Why are we stuck in here? It's a gorgeous day outside. Can we go outside and have an equivalent level of learning? You know, little things like that. And even though they might seem small, I think that some of these are questions other faculty are wondering. And if you sound like somebody that would want to explore these things, submit something. And, you know, we do have funding limits, we have space limits, but, you know, the best thing in my opinion is to ask. And who knows, there's some things I think that we might have access to that not everybody knows about, or, you know, I've generated a lot of relationships on campus from being in this program, so maybe those relationships are ones that you might benefit from as well. Who knows? So, you know, I'm always part of the philosophy, ask. Worst case scenario, we can come back and say we could fund this part, not this part, or whatever. Right. If you don't ask, it's a no. And I truly live by that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, because y'all might have noticed that Dawn's been advertising, I guess, about the proposals a little bit more than myself. I'm actually part of the selection committee. I help lead the committee and keep the conversation focused. And so I'm actually blind to who has submitted what. It is a blind process, besides to Dawn, because he knows who submitted what. He gives us the packets. We evaluate them using our rubrics that you guys see in the links, and that's the selection process. So because sometimes people ask me a little bit more specifics about it, and I can't tell you because I literally don't know. I never know until the end. After we've selected the projects, then we find out who it was. So, you know, I want to hear what you guys have to say about some of these ideas, and maybe some of it has inspired you guys to apply for this year's Mobile Fellows, which is due this Friday, October 21st, and I'll post the blog link that I'm going to make for this down below. Thank you guys so much for joining, and I hope that we can continue to do Techie Tool Time every Wednesday at 2. Bye, guys.